Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Shawn Sundsvold. Hi, Shawn.
Hi, Adi. How are you?
Doing great. And I'm so happy to now have you as a guest on my podcast.
I know it was so fun having you on our podcast and talking through that. So it's exciting to be able to do this for you and be on your show as well.
Yeah, so thank you very much. We had a great conversation about processes and procedures when I was a guest on your podcast. And today
Yes.
we're going to be having a great conversation about marketing and your area of expertise. So let me start by introducing you, reading the bio. So you are the co-founder and COO, so you are all into processes, of Gold Bear Media and co-host of the Better Together podcast.
Correct. Yeah.
With 20 plus years in business strategy, operations, and leadership, you help organizations grow with intention and clarity. You're known for your ability to connect ideas and action, which is very important. You bring a presence and perspective that tends to stay with people well beyond the conversation. So, and you have your Thought Leader podcast system, which is one of your new offers that you have. And we're going to talk about it because I'm all about podcasting and I love to hear about that. And we're also going to talk about, we're going to start with that, what you learned by almost dying.
Life is short, obviously. I had what was it, back surgery? I guess it was 2019 now, so it's been about 7 years since surgery happened. But you learn life is short really quick when you realize that tomorrow may not exist. Right. When I went into surgery, for just a quick rundown for your listeners, I had a spinal abscess that I got in 2019 in my spine, and it was between, backs T5, T6 area. And so I went in for surgery, and the infection that I had was systemic. So they weren't sure, like it was really touch and go for about 72 hours on whether or not I would even survive the surgery, much less be able to walk again. And so, what from almost dying, you kind of learn real quick that you don't get second chances a lot of times, right? Or when you get a second chance, you take advantage of it. And so I would call that a life turning moment in the sense of anything that I had on my life dreams that I hadn't done yet. Those became some of the first things I went out and did.
Like what?
Because skydiving was the first one. So after I had gotten through surgery and recovered and done all of that, I had wanted to skydive for probably 20 some years. And when I was younger in my 20s, my kids were young, and so my wife was like, "Hey, let's hold off on that one just a little bit longer." And I just never got around to it, right? It was always that thing on the list. And so after surgery and I've recovered and all that, I went skydiving for the first time in June of 2021, I think it was. And my daughter, my 18-year-old daughter at the time, Julia, went with me. She was so excited to go, and so we got to do that experience together.
How awesome. Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That is great. And
And
that is that when you started your business?
so we started the business in 2020. My wife actually was the one who started it, and
So you did start it after the operation. So it was again another life-changing experience.
yeah, it was one of those things like 2019, I was out of work for the entire year. And so, we were a one income family and just made it work for that year. And so when 2020 came around and I was able to go back to work, she just started picking up some freelance work in January of 2020, and we got our first couple clients. And then March came along with COVID, and for a lot of businesses, they had a lot of things to figure out, right, with COVID because there was so much changing. And while many struggled through it, I don't necessarily preach this from the mountaintop, but it was, it was a great opportunity for us in our business, and that was growing, right? Everybody needed digital presence. They needed websites, and the phone just wouldn't stop ringing for her. And I mean, she was getting job offers from places that were like, just please come help us, please come help us. And but she stayed at the nonprofit she was at, and we picked up the freelance work. And you know, June of this year will be 4 years. August of this year will be 4 years full time that Kelly's been at the business. So we started it kind of a part-time thing in 2020 and 2021, 2022 for about half that year, and then in 2022 she went full time, and a couple months later I joined her to be full time in the business.
Fantastic. What is your philosophy in terms of marketing? What should businesses absolutely do?
Marketing is such an important piece for businesses. It's that engine that drives people to find out who you are, right? Like we're in an age anymore that if you're not doing marketing, you're really missing the ball and dropping the ball, right? And there's so many different ways to do it through social media, through podcasts, through YouTube, through networking. There's just so many places you can get out there and do your business and promote your business. But if you are not doing marketing on some level, how are people going to find you?
Right.
That really comes down to what it is. And we use social media a lot, and a lot of our clients do. That's something we've won some awards for in doing that for people. And so that's really one of our first engines for really getting some growth for clients is through the aspect of social media. But it's just so important. Like you've got to have marketing to keep your business going.
Absolutely. So, what are some of the key ingredients that you will recommend that every business will have in terms of marketing?
So for marketing, some of the big things is consistency first, right? Have something you're doing consistently. I don't
Right.
care if it's sending an email once a month for a newsletter. I don't care if it's posting on social media. I don't care if it's podcast, YouTube, whatever it is. Have something you're doing consistently, because in the world of AI and all the algorithms for the different platforms, right? They reward consistency. They reward it the fact that, you're putting new content out on a regular basis that they can feed out to your followers. And when we talk to clients, that's usually one of the first questions we ask is how consistent are you in that? Because, we can already tell that if you're posting, maybe you post 2 times one week and then you don't post anything for a week and then you post another one thing and then you don't post for a month, the system, the algorithm, the math problem that it really is, right, doesn't know how to feed out what your content is. So without that consistency, you're really not giving yourself a chance to be successful.
That's very true. That's very true. It's kind of like having a system. I know when I was on your podcast, we talk about systematizing and processes. I mean, you have to have a process that you follow through in order to get it done.
You do. And we've helped our clients build that. And I said it on when you were on I was when you were on our show that systems are hard for me, right? I'm not native to it. It's something I have to really work at to do. But they're extremely valuable in the sense of, systems can create freedom for you, right? And as
They
business
really
owners,
can.
that's
They
what we
really
want,
can.
right? We make a business, we build a business to have the freedom to do what it is we want to do. And so, when you start getting those systems in place, it takes a little while sometimes to feel it or to understand what it's giving you, but really systems are freedom.
They really are. I agree with you that they are freedom and that's what people want. They want that freedom. So let's talk now about the Thought Leader podcast system. What does that mean?
So one of the things on LinkedIn especially is there's a lot of people out there who are trying to be what are called thought leaders, right? They want to stand out in their industry. And what we have built for clients is what we call our Thought Leader podcast system. And it's a system designed to help you build a podcast, be a thought leader in your space, and we do all the back end work for you. So, excuse me. So we're helping put the meetings together and get people on your calendar. We're helping you with scheduling. We're doing all the editing for the podcast. So really all that a client has to do is show up for a 20-minute pre-podcast meeting to find out if somebody's a great good fit for being a guest. And then they have to show up for the actual podcast recording, however long that is. And then every other aspect of how that looks is done by us. So, client introduction to clients, back end conversations, the podcast editing, the follow-up aspects of it, the social media side of it, all those and promotion, all that is done on our end to where we're making it really simple for people to build their own podcast.
So let's talk about what's the advantage. And, I have my own podcast now since 2021, and I
Hmm.
love it. And we've already, we're above 500, over 500 episodes. But what would you tell a business owner that is looking right now to start a podcast? Why should they start a podcast?
Podcasts are great in the sense of it gives people a chance to understand who you are, right? Because they get to hear your voice and your thoughts and your opinions on a very regular basis, right? And you'll get to talk, and with a podcast, you get to talk to people who could be potential clients. You can talk to people who may be further along in the business world than you are, right? And you get to learn and glean some information. So podcasts are really an opportunity to connect with people and let them learn who you are and build trust with you. We're in this environment now where trust is the first thing that has to be built before somebody's going to buy from you. And
Mhm.
so a podcast is a great way for people to get to know who you are as a business owner, as a business leader, how you think through things to see if they want to align themselves with you in doing business.
Right. That makes sense. What are some of key components that you feel have to be in place for a person to be able to become a thought leader?
Experience is really one of the first ones. They've got to understand their business, I think, better than most, right? Because, we work with a lot of coaches and consultants, and there's a large group of those people that, they know their business, but they're not necessarily taking that extra step to lead others. And that's really where those thought leaders stand a little bit differently, is that they're putting content out there that other people are following and that people are starting to align with how that person thinks and seeing the success from it because of, whatever system they've built, right? Like they trust the process and the things that they do to where it's helped them build a very long pipeline of success over and over and over and over and over again. And so when they're trying to put a podcast together, it's kind of that same idea, right? They're starting to share those thoughts and those systems and those ways of working. And there's something about when somebody is a thought leader like that, that just the way they talk about it, it stands out differently than, the rest of the group.
Right. And I think it's really also having the conviction, like knowing that you are certain in a certain area. Obviously, it has to be backed up by experience, by knowledge, by actual, I think, facts.
Yeah.
But when you're convinced that this is the way it is, let's say you're an M&A advisor and you know that this is the way to execute a deal, then you would go, okay, yes, I do understand that, and I that makes sense. Or when you are convinced that this is the way to run a company, it comes across, right? I mean, it has that conviction that is very important as well.
It does. And there's a level of almost calmness, right? That even in the whatever fire, panic, whatever it is, the people who've been through that enough times that they're like, oh, I've seen this before. I know how to handle this. There's just that confidence that comes through in those conversations and in how they present themselves that it again it separates them out from the rest of the group. And I think that's really what allows them to be that thought leader.
I agree. So, what do you think is stopping entrepreneurs that want to do a podcast, want to be a podcaster, they want to have their own show, being a host, from actually starting it?
Imposter syndrome, fear, I mean, the list can be long, right? But a lot of business owners, they almost become CEOs by accident, right? In the sense of they just started with an idea and all of a sudden it grew and grew and suddenly became this business that they're running but don't necessarily know if they know how to stand out, right?
Hmm.
So there's a lot of fear behind it of going, well, I did this, but I'm kind of like, I don't know, I shouldn't be the person doing this, right? I'm not smart enough, I'm not expert enough, I don't have enough experience. There's so many things that we tell ourselves about why we shouldn't do something. And
Hmm.
so one of the conversations I've had with potential clients recently is, well, why not you? Right? Like, why do you kind of poke at yourself like that and not give yourself the credit you've earned of, you have a business that's 10 years old. You're successful. You've grown every year. You've built a staff of, from yourself up to 10, 12, 15 people, right? What you've done all these things, what else is holding you back about really taking that next step and being that thought leader, being that person that can lead other people in this process?
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah. So it's really looking at it from that viewpoint and owning to who you are almost,
Yeah, it's
owning up to that.
yeah, and also learning that, confidence, I think, is a big piece of it, right? Like people who've built businesses, they have a level of confidence, but in what they're doing. But when you take it out a step further and you want to start talking to other people about the success that you've had and how you got there, I think we don't want to brag about it, maybe, but at the same time, like you should brag about it because you've worked hard. You've done the things that are necessary to get you to where you're at, and people look up to you for that, right? Like
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
have
No, I
the
want to give a big shout out to Debbie Allen. I interviewed her on my podcast, and she wrote a book, Shameless Self-Promotion. And she's all about that, but very nicely, not being obnoxious about it and not being overly,
yeah,
confident where you annoy others. But it's just like, that's who I am, and this is what I do, and you just help people. So yeah, why not promote yourself?
absolutely, absolutely. And I think sometimes we're taught from a young age, oh, stop talking about yourself, right? Quit bragging about yourself. But the reality of it is like that, why can't that just be confidence, right? Of going, I built this, or, let me tell you this story about this person that built this thing, right? There's a lot of excitement in that, and people want to hear that story, and I think it's motivating for them.
Yeah, it's inspiring. It's absolutely
Yeah.
inspiring. Yeah, and you want to inspire others. I think that is a common denominator for a podcast. If you are out there and inspiring others and give great information, that you're doing good.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite mentors, he's probably, I don't know, probably 10 years older than I am. Right. And he's been in the home remodeling industry for 20 plus years. And that's not necessarily the area we work in. Like we're a marketing company, but we work with a lot of home remodeling companies, and just watching the success he's had, like I just look up to him as a business owner, going, how can I be like you in 10 years?
You
Right.
want to give him a shout out? Who's that?
Craig Leary from Home Remodeling Pros. He's a great guy.
Nice. Okay, shout out to Craig right there. Great, great job on mentoring and being a role model. That's great.
So yeah, I've just so many opportunities out there, but really it is just don't be afraid to talk about yourself, and don't be afraid to talk about your successes, not in a, cocky, overconfident way, but just being confident about like, hey, here's what I've done in my life and here's the things I'm moving towards.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about some of the successes in the home remodeling area where you work with contractors that how do you help them?
Yeah, so really we look at a lot of times what we find with home remodeling companies and home service companies in general is marketing is inconsistent, right? It's been the thing that it sort of gets neglected a little bit in the process of building their business. Because a lot of times these are very talented individuals, right? They're great at the remodeling side of it. They understand how to build things. They have a vision for it and they love that business, but they don't always know how to talk about that business, right? So we've got a company we've been working with now for, and it's probably about 18 months. That it's taken us a little bit to get everything under control and getting going, but since then they're starting to finally, after a couple of years of struggling, they're really starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, and there's business is starting to pick up for them. Leads have now picked up for them. And so, but it took, we had to get the website redone, and get that updated so it had the right content, and doing their social media, looking at their SEO. How do we put emails together? And then even then, in part of that is building systems around how do you start following up with leads in a better way. Right. So there's been a lot of stuff we've done with this company to do it. And they're finally, like I said, starting to dig out of a pretty deep hole they had built the couple of years before, to where they're looking at now, do we need to bring in some additional staff to help out with some of the things that are happening?
That's great. That's
Yeah.
definitely where you want the company to be. So that's very good.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, Shawn. Well, if our listeners would like to get a hold of you, how can they do that? How they can reach out to you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is probably one of the best ways. I am the only Shawn Sundsvold on LinkedIn, I promise you. And then you can also go to our website. It's goldbear.media. And on there, there's a lot of good information. There's a form there you can fill out as well to reach out to us if you're interested in some of the things that we can do as far as whether it's social media, websites, building you a podcast. All those things are available to get more information on there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Shawn, for being a guest on this podcast.
Thanks, Adi. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.